So, Eileen, what was it like growing up in the Shankill?
Actually, growing up in the Shankill was actually very fun because I probably was, well, still am, a bit of a tomboy. So, I loved my bike, I loved my gliders, I loved all the street games and done everything, as a wee bit the black sheep of the family. I got my bike and I was able to hide my wee butt up the handlebar, so nobody could see me. When I turned the corner, I got the butt out of the handlebar, had a wee smoke, put it up the handlebar again, and real fun, growing up and just doing the games and the street games, and treasure hunts and things like that. And right up to the age of 14, that was my childhood. And then the troubles started, the conflict started. 69, I was 14 at the time, so my teenage years then were stolen away from me, because what you done normally in your teenage years was you got into trouble, you went to dances in the town, Betty Staffs and all those, activities in the town. But all those activities disappeared in my teenage years, and you didn't go into the town, because you were scared of getting blew up, or you just stayed in your own area, in your own wee square, far enough that if your mommy shouted, Eileen, you were able to hear, so you knew that you had to come home when you heard your mommy shouting. But me being me, I used to have my mates all lined up because I was nosying down at them fighting on the Shankill. They were fighting and ranting, and I used to go on top of Town Street and look down the Shankill and see all the rioters ranting. And if my mummy called me, I wouldn't have heard her. So all my mates had a relay that if my mummy called me, they came to find me to get back home. So childhood was absolutely fantastic. The community spirit that we had, and all our mates all lived in the street. We'd done the hopscotch, we'd done the two balls. I loved the gliders and the bikes, the roller skates, all that. And then that all, I actually went to Irish dancing. I was in an Irish dancing class from the age of 11, and when the troubles started, the Irish dancing classes all stopped because it was associated with Irish dancing. It wasn't associated as part of my culture, but I seen it as part of my culture when I was doing it, and won competitions and everything else in Irish dancing at a very low stage. But I might have been in Riverdance if the troubles hadn't started, and,
Yeah.
and I could have transferred into the big stage of Riverdance, but missed out on an awful lot in my teenage years. What about yours? What about yours, Susie? I mean, there's a wee bit of an age gap here, so
There
you,
is.
you were at a different age than what
Yeah.
I was at.
So, in terms of did I live in a relatively peaceful society before I was born or in my early years? No. Because by 69 I was only 5. So if you even go back to 69, I can remember being a refugee and having to leave the Lower Falls to go to St Thomas's School, where we got army blankets and pillows and had to lie on the floor for a couple of nights with the tear gas. I do remember tear gas. I have a strong memory of my mummy holding me on the ground and crying and the water burning and stinging your eyes. So, and again, my mummy stayed. It was me and my sister and my younger brother, older brother but youngest with the other two, who all went to St Thomas's School, and we stayed there for a couple of days and then went back down home. So that would be my earliest memory of the Troubles. And then we moved to New Barnsley. And again, it's like bittersweet because as a child you see it as an adventure rather than anything else. In terms of all the play, we done exactly the same. Right up through it, you played in the street, you played whatever games you could, hopscotch, tippy tig, one man hunt. Never owned a bike. Never did own a bike. But I learned to ride one. And so, if you even take it then to about 72, again, I was a refugee again and sent to Tralee for the whole of the summer, me and my sister, without our parents. So everybody went with their mother, but my mummy stayed behind because she had 3 older children. And so she just gave us to the neighbours and said, take them. And so we can remember arriving in a monastery in Tralee about 11 o'clock at night and getting cornflakes and toast. And then the whole of that summer, me and Kathy, we just stuck together because we were on our own with no mummy. But a family from Tralee came and took us out. So that's where I learnt to ride a bike. Because they let me on the bike. And I spent 6 weeks up and down their street on a bike. And then back home again. And then that's when my mummy says, you'll never go away again.
And that's strange, Susie, as you're saying that. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I can never remember any of the Protestant kids being evacuated. Never.
Never.
And
where we all were.
Yeah. And the age that I was when we heard that the Catholic children were being evacuated and the bus loads of kids were doing that, and a fear to us because they were getting
Took out of it.
So what's coming? You know,
Yeah.
we're still here. We're not being evacuated. So is the IRA going to then take over? Because they were getting all the women and children out of their communities. And again, it wasn't that.
Yeah, it was that perception.
That was that perception.
Yeah. Well, when I look at refugees today, I would sort of go to Kathy, even the minute in Ukraine, I was going, we were refugees, But it must have had a trauma of some kind because today me and her are still as close and as thick as 2 sisters. We don't live a day without seeing each other. We live very much similar. What we realised as we got older was we live very much similar to other people over in the Shankill Road and in other communities. You stayed within your community. You didn't go far. And again, from the age of 6, I did spend a big part of my life travelling to jails. And that was to see brothers because my 2 brothers were in jail. So in our house, the 3 girls were in one room and the 2 boys in the other room. When the 2 boys were in jail, I got a bedroom of my own. When they got out, I had to move back out of that bedroom and into the other bedroom. But yes, I did. I went to the Maidstone, I went to Longcash, I went to the Crum. And they were normal stuff. Even on the parcel days, when your mummy had to make 2 parcels for the 2 of them, that was the day all the fruit came in, that's the day all the biscuits came in, and you got to steal a bit of stuff because there was an abundance of it.
They were getting fed.
That was going into a box and rode on and bagged, and you were going, we never get that, So you always got to steal a couple of chocolate biscuits and you would have got shouted at, that's not for you. But that was your abundance day when the parcels were being made. So I think we just grew up. It was normal. It was normal in our community because nearly every household was going through that normal.
Yeah, and seeing that, I used to visit the jails too, different ones. People maybe didn't have a visitor or something like that.
Yeah.
And used to go up and used to astonish me then, afterwards looking back and going, I seen mothers struggling, really, really struggling to put food on the table. And you were going up and the men were getting 3 meals a day and knew where their bed was.
And they still got their parcels.
And they still got their parcels, but the women were struggling and keeping communities going, throughout that, on both sides of the community, right
and
across.
The steak and the sausages was cooked and wrapped.
And their Oxford shoes and their Wrangler jeans and everything else. And people couldn't even afford to put school uniforms on the kids' back, but the men got...
You had to look after them.
The men got looked after.
Yeah.
But women were struggling and constantly struggling. And again, when you go through it, when I was 16, 17, I joined the UDA, and it was before the UDA was illegal. And that was the purpose of giving out the milk and the butter to the pensioners, in the areas, the time of the no-go areas, you know, that they couldn't get out to do their shopping, and you couldn't have got a whole lot of stuff because things weren't coming in. And I can remember, you know, delivering the milk and the butter and the sugar and the different things to the people's houses. But also, because of the age that I was sent out to collect milk bottles for the petrol bombs. You know, but that, you know,
Yeah.
you're saying it was normal. You know, what I mean, that was everybody was doing it, and like I've spoke to people from the Falls of my age.
Yeah.
They were doing exactly
Exact
the
same.
same thing.
Yeah.
So you know, it was only when you look back and we are where we are today, and the relationships that we've built up today, that we were talking about those experiences, realise that women were doing the same on both sides of the community, and it was just trying to keep things going. And I think that's, you know, where women's centres actually came into their own at that stage.
But they weren't ever things that were planned. They weren't planned and premeditated. Everything was reactionary. Even when we look back, you sort of go, well, you never thought to sit and concoct all this and do it. It was always done as a reaction to something else or to an action.
Yeah.
And so you just went with the flow. Like even today, the summertime's sort of known for riots. And the riots aren't about really strong stuff. A lot of the riots is to do with the kids just get bored in the streets, and it's great to have a wee riot across from the other. And that didn't change even with us. It was, well, we'll start a wee riot here because you were bored and there was nothing to do. And so you grew up saying there's one side, the other side, let's get a riot going. You know, everything throughout the conflict was always done as a reaction to something that occurred.
What the other side done,
What
vice versa.
Or even
Yeah.
with us, what was going on with the British Army.
Yeah.
You know, they could have hit a house, started wrecking the house, so the whole street got out. You know, so it was
can
always a
vividly
reaction to an
I
action.
can vividly remember the bin lids.
I loved the bin
Bin
lids.
lids. I used to play earlier in my teens. Like I used to play in Ballymurphy because my aunt was Catholic, and so you know Catholics weren't bad people to me because they
Yeah.
were my cousins. You know, it was more the IRA rather than Catholic people, and I can always remember the pile of bin lids all being ready and armed. If soldiers come into the area, the bin lids come out,
And I
and you
think
can
how-
hear it right across Belfast.
And you
no
didn't
matter
care
where
what
the-
age you
no.
and we're in our street, like 4 and 5-year-olds were on the street. You know, it was
lids.
it was something to do. You started your bin lid, so you grabbed it and you went out. I remember one night actually out with the bin lid, and as I was rattling it, I just felt a whiz go by, and I went, "What was that?" And
Rubber
it
bullets.
was rubber bullets. So I actually moved further back to rattle the bin lid rather than go closer. But I do have, like, I've
Big memories,
strong
like, it's
memories.
real
Yeah, I've strong
fun.
memories of seeing friends at riots with their faces completely busted open, where they had the rubber bullets did hit
Yeah.
them. My brother was shot, and I was with him, and I was P6. He was helping me. He was helping me over to the shops, and he run and he was shot. And I really remember that and being just lifted and hoisted and carried home, and that was a dreadful time.
Wasn't that much drinking going on?
No.
Because you couldn't have went to the bars in the town. You know, you were scared of a bar being blow up. You know,
I never
Shankill,
went-
yeah.
I never
I mean,
went to the
Shankill
town.
suffered 5 bombs.
Yeah.
You know, in that space of time.
Yeah.
You know, the last one being the Shankill bomb,
Yeah.
but you know, it was bars that were being hit all
Mm-hmm.
the time. So you were fearful of going into a bar. So, and the Shankill community at times sort of way. Every time a bomb went off, there was another immigration out of the Shankill that lived somewhere else.
people moved
you
out.
know, so five bombs within 500 yards of each other was something that doesn't be looked at now. That there's a lot of trauma still there in a lot of people's lives that never has been dealt with. And only for, you know, organisations, women's organisations, women's centres, where those people can come in, women can come in and talk freely or not talk, whatever they choose to do, I think, you know, is something that I'm very proud of being part of. All these years, you know, whatever I've done in my past and my teenage years, it has made me who I am today, and been able to build relationships up with the women we work with, but also together. It shows that, you know, people can be friends, and I mean friends. People can't trust each other.
But I think we've got to a stage where in today we never ever look back on it as I say, it was always the norm. It was a normal, natural process of how you lived. You know, I remember going to Edinburgh for the first time ever at 21 and walking into a shop and standing in the shop to get searched and then realising, oh, nobody searches you. You know, because it was norm to go in and stand like that and somebody frisk you and then let you go shopping.
Open your bag.
So, and open your bag. So that was normal to us. It wasn't until you got older and you started seeing different things that this isn't normal. And then I think when the peace process came in and a whole world opened up, you realised how unnormal it was. And the distance we've travelled today, you're looking at your kids and your grandchildren and you're saying, I never want you to experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's the level of trauma. We never looked at it as trauma. We don't recognise it as trauma. And we don't even really want to know how to deal with it because it happened and we've moved on. But you don't want to for your kids.
Yeah, and you know, I probably was very lucky in one sense that
You had 14 years ahead of
I had
me.
14. You know what I mean? Well, I'm not 14 years older than you.
Okay.
So you just, you know what I mean? Just,
Okay.
but you know, at 14, I had an opportunity experiencing life without the troubles, without the conflict, and pose my now, you know, it got me here today. But you know, I want a bit of that again. I want that back. You never experienced it, so you don't know what it is. But I want what I had for 14 years.
Right.
You know, now I'm not saying those 14 years weren't without conflict somewhere, because it had been
there
boiling
was.
up and boiling up, but never reached us in the street, never reached Belfast to that scale. And when I joined the trade union movement in my early 20s, I got a whole new different life. I got a whole different aspect in life. There was things that I was hearing in my own community that when I joined the trade union movement, I was questioning, why have I been told such a thing all these years? And now I'm finding out the truth. Now, it may have been at that time within that community that was the truth in that community, but it was only when I started working with women from other communities that I realised that, you know, something wasn't right here, you know, because I then started going down the human rights and civil rights road, because it wasn't right to strip search women in the prison. Now, in my community, that was a Republican issue, because it was Republican women prisoners who were being searched. If I hadn't had the trade union behind and the Women's Advisory Committee within the trade union pointing out the wrongs of that as a human rights issue, I probably wouldn't have. I would have been in my own community. I would have been accepting that. That's because they were Republican women prisoners, and that's why they got. But it wasn't the case. The case was strip searching was wrong, and it didn't matter who they were searching. It didn't matter why it was a man, a woman, or whatever. It was wrong, and I went down that road of you know, trying to right the wrongs in my own head of what I had grew up with and what I had believed in. I'm not saying it was propaganda mainly. It wasn't anybody coming and sitting me down and telling me stuff. It was just what you were hearing on the news, propaganda within your own community. And I sort of, when I started to be very active within the trade union movement, I then seen a completely different life.
Well, me and Eileen really met, started a good relationship when Aileen worked for Women's Support Network on the Len Kelly project, which was a women's prison project, and it was a pilot in Belfast, where Shankill, Windsor Women's Centre, Falls Women's Centre, and Women's Support Network came together. And the project was to support women in prison and women coming out of prison, that they would come into the women's centres and then begin rebuilding their lives in the women's centres. And that was really our first time actually working off each other.
Yeah, before it went even into the network, because we done it as a pilot.
Yeah.
Just the 3 centres,
Yeah.
without the Women's Support Network, and
No,
then
they managed it.
They managed it, but
Yeah.
we still
Yous were on
we
the
were
ground.
already based in the Women's Centre, so it was
Yeah.
a part-time post.
Yeah.
And build the relationships up with myself and Breed
Yeah.
and Hazel at the time, and then our managers, because Susie, you managed the thing, and that actually was the beginning of building that whole, that and the other thing that we had done with the Bridge of Hope, where we'd done the transitional justice,
Yeah.
where probably was the first time really, because we were involved in a lot of stuff together, but it probably was the first time where we all sat round the table and talked about our experiences.
Yeah.
And that probably was the first time, because we were so busy looking after the trauma and the women in the communities of how the conflict had affected them, and our work was on that. We were responding to the needs of women in the communities at that time. So that's when our relationship really took off, and then it moved to a full-time job in the Len Kelly to work with those women coming out of prison. And that was a great project when you look at it, because our core group then was 18 women. And out of those 18 women, none of them went back into prison after spending 6 months with us.
Yeah.
None of them went back into prison.
And some of them still come in today into here.
Yeah, and it actually was unique, because these women were from all over Northern Ireland, and if they needed somewhere in Lisburn, we rung Lisburn Women's Centre. I mean, I can remember ringing Margaret down in Derry and saying, Margaret, look, we have a couple of women who are going to Derry out of prison. Can we set up a wee bit of support mechanism down in Derry? And the Women's Centre in Derry looked after those women. So, you know, we have a network province-wide. It wasn't just a Belfast network. And that's what we offered them women that they never were offered in their lives before, which was a choice.
Yeah.
They were offered a choice, and they couldn't believe that they were being treated as human beings and being given choices. For them to make up their own mind, rather than the system making their minds up for them.
Yeah. Well, the history of Falls in Shankill is the Falls formed. We formed in 1982. And it was mainly formed to actually help women whose husbands were in jail. And for the first time, a woman was finding herself on her own in the house, having to cope with money for the first time financially, having to cope with less money because the man wasn't there, and then having to go to jail. And so the Falls Women's Centre was about, well, we'll mind your kids, you go up and see your man, do what you need to do. And then we had Troops Out movement. And they came over, and that began the whole feminist ethos till the centre. And you were starting to look outside of just being the woman and saying, well, no, what about equality for us? What about education for us? And then Shankill Women's Centre came over and says, can we replicate what you have? And so religion didn't come into it, divide didn't come into it, you on the other side didn't. Yes, if it's all about women, and the politics are left at this outside, there's a chance here to build relations. And they are the two first women's centres in the north.
Yeah.
All the other women's centres then formed after that. And if you take even the 80s, when we lost our funding because we were classed as a sectarian organisation supporting the IRA, it was Shankill Women's Centre came out onto the road and protested for us to get our funding back. So it was like egg threw on the council's face when we had women from the Protestant community standing with us to say, what he's talking about here. He's just want to penalise another group. And then we, as you say, we got busy over the years with our own organisations. But at any given time, you could pick the phone up to the Shankill and say, can you help? Or we have this on offer, and vice versa. But I think as the Transitional Justice Programme,
Yeah.
and the Transitional Justice Programme is in universities, but they did forget about women.
Absolutely.
And they did admit that when they completed the programme,
Yeah.
they didn't include women.
Yeah.
And so they came to us with this 6-week programme and a weekend in Lusty Beg
Yeah.
to actually put a context of transitional justice for women in it. And that was a hard programme.
It was a hard programme,
'Cause
and
in that we talked about the
Yeah.
Shankill bomb, we talked about the
everything.
hunger strike, we talked about the blanket protest. It was very hard hitting for the women.
Angie, I can remember Angie's story.
Yeah,
It's no
it's
longer
very
with
hard
us, like.
hitting because sometimes we got in for a wee tit for tat. What
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
But we created that programme
Yeah.
that's still today in universities.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of us actually looking at how far can we go with the good relations? How far can we start to build women to be at a more political level and a more understanding and meet women from the other side to actually have a unified voice?
Yeah, but it was even bigger than that too, because I can remember coming over here way early on, and it probably was the 80s, when, no, it wouldn't have been, it probably would have been the early 90s, where you had an information day here on the Philippine nurses.
Yeah.
And because there was a lot of racism and
Yeah.
things happening at that time, and you had brought the trust in who had actually went to the Philippines and recruited these
Yeah.
nurses, and you had an information day with those nurses that were coming over along with the statutory bodies to explain the reason why these nurses were coming,
Yeah.
why the Philippines were setting up homes here, and that give us an understanding that we then could take that back into Shankill Women's Centre and then let people know, women
Yeah.
in the Shankill know, this is why these Philippine families are
Yeah.
coming home here. It was because they had to go to the Philippines and recruit nurses to fill the spaces that we didn't have here
Yeah.
in the hospitals. So, those type of things were happening. They weren't political,
No.
but there was things that if we could give the right information out, it caused a lot. It actually helped with the racism at that time, because then people had a better understanding why people from foreign countries were coming into, well, the Royal Hospital at that time,
Yeah.
and the Mater Hospital and the City Hospital at that time, to come here and work. And I think that is still today one of the good advantages of the women's centres, that we get the information, we give the proper information out, and we allow women to make up their own minds, but we give them the information first before they can make up their own minds. And that came to a foe, I think, the Good Friday Agreement, everybody's peace, it was hope. But, people were shaking hands and storming. We were already, we had passed the stage of shaking hands at that time. We were friends. We were hugging each other, sometimes. But we had those debates. We agreed to disagree, but we never fell out, and we got on with the business.
No,
we
'cause
got on with
I-
the jobs that needed to be done, because the Good Friday Agreement caused us a lot of issues when the men got out of prison under the domestic violence. So it created a lot of stuff for our centres that we had, and when you look back, Susie, nearly every women's centre had advice units. We lost all that funding. We used to have 2 advice workers in the Shankill. We lost our advice workers in the Shankill, because funding kept getting pulled away, which I felt at the time, here we were, 90s, prior to the Good Friday Agreement, 80s, prior to any ceasefires of any type, and we were on the ground, we were doing the hard work, we were looking after the women, who were looking after the communities, who was feeding the kids, who were sending the kids to school, who were doing all that stuff, maybe working 2 and 3 jobs,
Me
pennies
cleaning
for
jobs.
pennies, cleaning jobs, you know, and there was like a black market at the time, I have to say, for people to make ends meet. And we were dealing with all that stuff long before the Good Friday Agreement
Yeah.
came about. So when they started shaking hands, we got no recognition, and we still don't get any recognition today on the work that we had done prior to the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe if it wasn't for the information, the Good Friday Agreement, you know, was a document that we broke down into ordinary layman's language and explained the pillars, the three pillars, the three bits. You know, I can remember explaining the Good Friday Agreement as to the women that I was working with at grassroots level who had very little education at the time, that, you know, it was like a milking stool. And they were going, what do you mean like a milking stool? And said, I says, well, if one of them legs is not on the milking stool, what happens? She says, it falls. And I says, well, the Good Friday Agreement, each of those three pillars have to work together, because if one doesn't work, the other two fails. And sort of we started the conversation with layman's terms, layman's English. And there was another thing that you know, I mean, I had women coming into me after the Good Friday Agreement saying, we need a class on the Good Friday Agreement. And I'm going, well, sure, you've already voted, but we never read it. And I put a class on in the centre, because there was a lot of stuff going about there. And it did seem, I have to say, that the Catholic community was getting more than what the Protestant community was getting. That was a perception from people in the Protestant communities.
Because on the other side, the Catholic community thought they were giving a lot up.
Yes, yeah. But
we're sacrificing a lot
when I
for
was
the Good Friday
explaining that part of the Good Friday Agreement, you know what I mean, I would have used the scenario as, right, here's scales. This is scales. Yeah. And at this minute in time, without the Good Friday Agreement, without civil rights, because you had to bring the civil rights movement and all into it too, that you know, Catholics were here, and housing lists, all those different things, you know, the one man, one vote, all those different things that Catholics weren't getting, and a lot of Protestants weren't getting them either, to a certain degree. It depended 100%. If you had money.
Yeah.
You know, didn't get a vote if you didn't own your own house. So to explain that to a group of Protestants that didn't even realise that they were as downtrodden as some Catholics was. And the Good Friday Agreement actually balanced it.
Yeah.
It balanced it. Now, it did look as if Protestants got nothing out of it, but they already had a lot of the stuff the Catholics were going to get. And when you explain things in an easier way and people can understand and relate to it, doesn't mean to say we were telling them to vote for it. What we were saying to them, this is what it's about. Now you have the information, and go away and do your own thing. And I don't think at that time, if the women's movement and the women's centres hadn't they actually took that on board at that time, we probably wouldn't have a Good Friday Agreement. But it was very exciting to see the Women's Coalition being round the table negotiating the Good Friday Agreement. Because up to that point, and we can't forget, and we must remember the work that Mo Molan done. Because at that time, I don't think we would have got anything really over because she went into the prisons and spoke to the Loyalist prisoners and spoke to the Republican prisoners at that time. Very brave. And the woman was fighting cancer at the time. So, and it was good to see that we had women round that table, because it was men, and always has been men, negotiating round all the tables, and not a bit of wonder the state of the country was in the way that it was. And I think it was very important to see women for the first time round that table. Probably been treated badly, but at the same time, they stuck it out. And then we had this influence of ordinary working class politicians coming to the fore. And you mentioned a few there, you know, I mean, you had Gerry Adams, you had David Irvine, you had Billy Hutchison, you had the PURG, Gary McCartney, you know, I mean, you had two fractions of loyalism there for the first time being on the ballot paper, and you had the Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA. at that time. And probably it was the first time in any of our voting, if we ever got a vote, that you could actually vote for somebody who lived in your community and who knew the issues in your community.
It was a time of unsurety. In our community even, it was unsure of, where are we going? Is there a surrender going on here? Or are we going to get annihilated up in Stormount? Is this all just a piecemeal thing going on? Because we did look on it in our community and going, how much are we giving up and how much are we surrendering to get this? And what will we get in the end? Like, one of the biggest things, the biggest euphoria that we had during that time was the first time nationalists got marching into the City Hall. And it was one of the biggest marches ever. I know there's the famous quote, "We haven't gone away,"
Yeah.
that was said at City Hall. But that was the first time ever Catholics were allowed to actually march in the city centre. And it was phenomenal. It was fantastic. You felt as if something had changed for you to be allowed and be recognised in your community. I can remember looking at David Irvine and listening to David Irvine, and to me the man was talking sense, because he was talking about working class issues. In the Women's Coalition, it was the first time forever that women actually made a movement and went public and actually held positions. But it did make an imprint on the Good Friday Agreement, and it did make decision making for the first time ever for women, and it brought women to the front of politics.
Absolutely.
And that can never be took away.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see from then the amount of women who have went into politics.
Yeah. Well, it had to be highlighted how male dominated our politics was, and that was then beginning the process of, all right, well, we need to start breaking our party up and putting some women in. And yet we did talk, were they token women at this stage?
And we still actually have a way to go there.
Very much a long way to
where
go.
we need a gender balance at all committee level, whether it's at grassroots level or at Stormount level. We still need to get that gender balance, and not only gender balance. We're a multicultural society now. It's no longer our issues on the ground are no longer orange and green issues. No. It goes away beyond that. Yes, there is still some of those issues that needs ironed out and needs done. And I think in hindsight, I think the groups who were working throughout that conflict from the early 80s right through should have actually been core funded to continue the work that they had been doing. And, instead of having to go every so often, every year nearly, every 2 years, at the max every 3 years, we're cap in hand, looking to refund the work that we've been doing.
Well, for us as a centre, the peace money that came with the peace process, for the first time, actually offered community education at a high level. That's when we designed our counselling course.
Yeah.
And we were able to offer, and we still are today, thank God, but we were able to offer women 3 years, which is a university degree, 3 years of coming into the centre on one subject that left you a qualified counsellor walking out. So for the first time, even in the women's sector, it strengthened the level of education and the quality of education that we could deliver, still with a community setting, still with a support setting, that colleges still seem very far away for some women in our community.
Well, they're not looked as a safe space for them.
And all of a sudden it's on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And you feel you can achieve because you've been supported. So the education that came with the peace money, and it wasn't even education that came, it was the ingenuity of the centres. It was what we could think of. It's what we could develop. It's what we could create.
And again, with women come in and asked, if there's enough women asked for something, we actually managed to resource it
you
and
went
put
out
it
and
on.
you looked for it and you created it.
I can remember, over in Shankill, they don't really look at the women who went through Shankill and continued on to university and got doctorates and diplomas, and that all started in a women's centre
Yeah.
somewhere, and that doesn't be recognised, that we're not just a centre that women come in.
We're not dealing just with women's issues.
No, we're dealing with everything.
We offer women every
Yeah,
opportunity that we
because
can that
if
they
you
want.
educate the woman, you educate
Yeah.
the family, and it goes in. If the groups that I work with, Susan, a lot of the groups that I work with, and I work with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of your women, we do share our resources. If I have something that they like the steps
Yep.
course, which is a personal development, self-esteem course, I deliver it over here for Falls, but then you come in partnership with our education team on the counselling.
Yeah.
So it's it's not give and take as such. If you have it, we get it. If we have it, you get it. And if the both of us have it, we both share it.
Yep.
And it's about the resources that we have, to use those resources to the best possible outcome for the women that we are actually
Yeah.
working on.
It's
It's
always-
not,
it-
it's
we've
not
all-
about us, it's about the women that come in the door.
We've all kept our ethos of looking at what a woman needs. That has never changed. But the peace process, the peace money, allowed us to flourish. Now, it was took away from us by the sixth year of the 2 rounds of 3-year funding, and at the end of that third year of funding, they decided that they didn't need to have a women-specific funding, which again we could have collapsed, but we found other ways and we found alternatives.
I won't go back, we're here to stay.
Well, we're not shifting too far.
We're not shifting too far, but,
And if we take it even to our good relations, it grows bigger and bigger every year. It gets wider every year. And the women who've been on it even from its inception, from we started working together, who are still here, they've got a voice now where they can actually go back into their community and challenge things.
Yeah.
And that's that's the nature of our work, that we want, our nature of our good relations work is that we want to continue challenging what we feel we need to challenge.
And I think that, that's a good example that we're doing now at the minute too, because we do a lot of that good relations and peace building work in the grassroots level in our centres, and women come over here, come from Shankill over here to do dealing with the past, and
Yeah.
we share all that, and then when they get to a certain degree, we send them on epilogues, which is another wow.
Yeah.
This is something.
So
I can remember
yeah.
having a conversation with you before you done the epilogues,
Yeah.
and you saying, "Oh, I've never been challenged in my point of view, my opinion. I've never been challenged." And I says, "Well, you're going on the next epilogues course," and then we were able to support an application for Gaslights for 3 years, that yourself, Falls, Shankill, and we brought a rural aspect into it.
Yeah.
Because we're inclined to think that everything happens in Belfast, when there's women who live in rural areas now. They're not too rural, but they're still rural. Antrim, Glengormley, that goes out as far as Toome, and we're bringing women in from those areas to join the women from Shankill and Falls to do that epilogues programme. And I know you went on it, and we haven't looked back, and we put
No,
12 women
there's
through
a lot of work to
There's
it.
a lot of work to it, a lot of work, and a lot of mindsets change, a lot of opinions change, but a lot of opinions stay the same. So it's not about changing your opinion, it's about just giving you the information for you to make up your own opinion. And if your own opinion stays the same as the way it was, that's okay. But I don't know anybody that comes out of that steps, or that epilogues without having a change of a heart, or change of opinion of some shape or form.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about educating. It's not about saying you're right and I'm wrong. It's not about that. It's about your stories is as equal as important as somebody else's story, and to tell it. And
But the hardest part for us, and we do recognise it, we do all that work. We do all that building in between. And then our politicians can go on TV and totally crash everything we've done
yeah.
with whatever they're saying.
Yes, so the more women we can educate, the better, because
Yeah.
we don't have the politics here.
It can be
It's still an
frustrating.
orange and green
Yeah.
politics when it's on the media, and really it's no longer orange and green in our communities. We have a lot of women here coming in from other communities, and they're part of our community as a woman.
And they're not discussed.
They're not
at the
discussed.
level of government. No. They're not.
And they should be.
They
and
should
they should
be.
be. And they should be. And I think that's a space, and it's a safe space. And it's a space that people feel comfortable in to come in and tell about their issues of being here from Syria, being here from Afghanistan, from all those war countries. We can understand it
But even-
because we worked with those women throughout our conflict.
Yeah.
So when them women come here, they're directed to a women's centre, a women's organisation, and that's where they can get the support to help them and educate them that they can go into worthwhile jobs here as well. The same, and be treated like a citizen, like everybody else.
And just to keep it alive in our aim now, we're looking at a constitutional conversation.
We are, yes.
We're looking at a cross-border women's sector,
Encounter. Yeah.
women's encounter. So we've been doing that now for nearly 2 years, and we had COVID.
Yeah.
But we took the mantle again because we know the constitutional conversation's going on.
Yeah.
We know it's going on at an academic level and a
Yeah.
government level, but no one's talking about grassroots. And we just sat and said, well, I think we need to look at this at a grassroots. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And so if we say we're taking up another mantle, I think our new mantle going forward is looking at a constitutional conversation or a power sharing or a cross-border sharing that actually works to make women's lives better.
And you're saying that, Susie, but I think too, our politicians and people who are in positions of power within our civil servants, when you look at it, yes, I work in Shankill Women's Centre. Yes, I coordinate Greater North Belfast Women's Network. Yes, I work with Falls and do good relations work, but I'm also on the National Women's Forum of the whole island. I'm also a Women in Leadership subgroup in Glencree. I'm also involved in Carmela. So yes, we have a job to do.
We have been doing work.
But we go out, and that encounter that we were on Zoom the other day with two women from the south, from Rowanstown, that came through the National Women's Forum, which I sit on. That there hasn't been. I remember 20 years ago I was doing cross-border work and working with Tala in Shanty, and that all seemed to disappear when the peace money and all disappeared, and a lot of that cross-border stuff wasn't happening. And I think we need to hear what women are saying in the south, and they need to hear what women are saying in the north, so that we can come together. And if the conversation that we're going to have on the constitutional conversation is one that we're getting all aspects of what's actually happening, and again, so that's also, we just don't work to the programmes within centre. We also take an active role in this whole island,
We step
if
up.
it benefits women.
Yeah, and if we see that it's not benefiting women, we'll do a bit of challenging.
We'll do a bit of challenging and
looking to see where hold on, can you fund us to do something?
Yeah,
And I think that's given where we are today, given that we have Brexit and protocol, and the shift and change that all that's bringing, both governments, north and south, need to look to say, how can we support a strong women's sector, north and south, to have a voice in whatever changes is coming forward?
Yeah, both for the Irish government and with their own. But just going back to that epilogue, so I can remember, Stephen, and we had the conversation when I had the initial conversation, and then I rung you to see if you would support it, and I rung Kathy, and Stephen had said to me, Aileen, can you get us some other support? So I give them Strabane, I give them Derry, I give them Lurgan, I give them women right across this whole province is now doing that epilogues because they supported the concept of the programme. So women throughout the whole, and we're having the the week before Good Relations Week, we're bringing all them
Bringing
women
them all together in
all
St.
together
Campbell's.
in St. Campbell's Hall to talk about what else, where are we going to go now. And Good Relations this week is that we are the change. The change starts here. Actually,
We've always been the change.
We've always been the change, and it doesn't actually start anywhere else.
No.
Because it continues
We
to
try
do
to be
the
the
work.
change and the
that they're doing.
challenge.
We are the change and the challenge,
Yeah.
and really, I think that's where we're at. This is the 5th time, isn't it, that Stormont has failed? I think 5th time, and all those times we've kept going. We have kept doing the programme for government. We work towards what we agreed on in the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
And we still haven't got a lot of stuff that women wanted. Civic Forum being one, the Bill of Rights being another.
100%.
And the dealing with the past and things like that was things that we voted, I voted for to enable those things to be, not just within the political, but that we had a civic forum doing that. And grassroots people at this stage now, their voices are not being heard unless it's us doing something about it.
Well,
That network that was set up was one of the reasons why that network was set up, the Greater North Belfast Women's Network, was because women weren't speaking out on what was happening in their communities. And people were scared of being intimidated within their own communities. That if they seen something going wrong, they couldn't really speak out because then they would be targeted for saying what they said. So the network was set up in a sense that people could bring their issues to the network. We could discuss it. We could actually speak. I would speak on behalf of the network. It wasn't speaking on behalf of any individual.
Yeah.
I was speaking on behalf of a network, so nobody would be intimidated or nobody would be, singled out. And we still live in certain areas, in certain communities, we still live with that fear. So the grassroots voices of the unheard voices, because there is grassroots voices out there, and they're entitled to those voices, but they are not entitled to take away the voice of the unheard voices. And I think that's where we come in, or well, that's where I come in, because a lot of stuff that I'm hearing is not what I'm hearing on the media, is not what I'm hearing around my network table. So when I speak out on behalf of those unheard voices, which it would be in the majority, in I'm not saying we don't have different points of view or we don't have that debate among that, but there's a strong feeling that there's a lot of unheard voices, and I think that's the role of community leaders. But I also have to sort of way, within that network, I have 5 people who work and who are waged in that network, right? And there's about 13 of the organisations that's operating with the volunteers. They don't get no wages, don't get nothing, but they keep their women's group going on their own voluntary basis. They get a wee bit of maybe room hire, a wee bit of heating, a wee bit of telephone expenses, but that's all they get, and they keep them going. And I think if you take one worker out of a paid worker, waged worker, out of the community, and especially out of the women's centre, you lost 10 volunteers. So you're losing 11 people out of that community. And I see that very much so within the network that I work with, because every one of those women were in food banks, they were in caring, they were looking after grandkids, they were doing homeschooling, they were doing the home helps, they were taking on other caring roles within their communities, going to getting prescriptions for them, going and getting their messages, and women were the backbone of, not saying that there wasn't men there was, absolutely there was men there done fantastic work, but the backbone and the majority were women. And what was good about that too, in certain areas, in a number of areas, and I'll mention Laganeel and Ardoyne and Ballysillan, where kids who are normally were at interface fens all got mucked in and helped in the food banks. So not only did they create the women, but they also stopped a lot of the antisocial behaviour with the young people, and the young people to this day, because of the food banks and because of the things that happened through COVID, are all now community leaders. And that's what the power of women working together and bringing young in, as well as looking after the old.
Yeah, and I think a lot has changed. If you even take the last 3 or 4 years and COVID came in, for women's centres, for ourselves, for Shankill, we didn't close. We became a frontline service. We were always a frontline service. We became a frontline service. We had to open our doors. We had to look at what our community needs. And we done a lot of sharing. As 2 women's centres, we done a lot of sharing.
We did.
But even from COVID, I think the most depressing thing we have today is that we don't have a government. At the last elections, you felt that maybe, just maybe, there was going to be a change. Just maybe we were going to get a government that would work for us, because they had all the praise for us during COVID.
Yeah.
You know, all the political parties
Tea and
recognised
biscuits.
how much work was done by groups on the ground, by the women's sector, and every one of them recognised it. So you actually thought, come this election, they will go in and they will make some changes, because we are in a depression and we're in a recession, and there's nothing more important than getting a working government to help what's going on at the moment, and we don't have that. I think that's the most disappointing thing for us, even as a women's sector, that we had our election, the people voted, our government should have got together to help us here in a time of crisis, and we don't have that.
Yeah, and
what we're doing as women's centres, we're still continuing on.
Yeah, we're still there.
We're still there. We're still together. We're still planning a future ahead.
Yeah.
Even though this might look bleak at the moment, we are still having visions to plan a future, because we are planning our epilogues. Yeah. We are planning conversations. We are looking at equality for women. We are looking at enhancing women's lives and empowering women with as much knowledge as we can, because we don't have all the answers, so we have to empower ourselves or get someone to help us empower ourselves to actually keep passing that on. And that's where our government's really letting us down.
And I agree with you. You know, there's nothing that I disagree with, but we also have to recognise that there is groups where the protocol, they fear losing their identity. They fear their Britishism, and I get that, and I think that is, but I don't think we needed to bring down Stormont to do that.
Protocol's an issue,
and
deal
it's an
with
issue
the
in
issues and deal with everything else that we have at hand.
And put it at the top of the agenda, but it doesn't mean the rest of the agenda doesn't be looked at.
It doesn't mean that our fuel poverty shouldn't have been looked at. And these aren't women's issues.
Yeah.
If you remember, we had the conversation last week where we talked about fuel poverty, food banks, women getting life hard, and we said these aren't women's issues. These are government issues, but women are the ones that's carrying it at the moment.
Yeah, they get the blunt of everything that happens.
And again,
they got the blunt during the conflict. They got the blunt during all any strikes and any walks out and any 5 times that Stormont has been down. Women have got the blunt of it, and they got the blunt of it at COVID.
But today we should have a First Minister, Deputy First Minister, and even for the first time ever in our history, a woman First Minister on the nationalist side of the community. What changes could have happened had we got a working government together? Because it is about making change to make our lives better. It is about making change,
yes, it is. And you know, we can banter and we can carry on, but the prod's got a First Minister first.
Okay.
Well, you know I mean? Just have to throw that in, Susie.
Even as we talk today, and we were talking earlier on, we have to recognise David Trimble.
Absolutely.
And
John Hume and...
what do you call him?
I'm not going to...
Seamus Mallon. David Trimble and Seamus Mallon made history.
Yeah.
You know, they were... Like, I can remember them coming to the Royal, where Barbara de Bruyne put £10 million into the Royal for the first time ever. And I went as a wee...
Was that after our protest when they were going to close the maternity? Remember we did Shankill and Falls done a protest together?
A big piece of work to save the Royal Maternity.
The Royal Maternity.
But I can remember going as a support worker to see that and feeling such a euphoria.
When
that
I
we
was
were
watching
moving.
the TV over the last couple of days with David Trimble and everything
Yeah.
else, I actually got that sense of it took me a way back, Susie, and it got a sense of there's hope here. You know, the
Yeah.
Good Friday Agreement, it wasn't perfect. No, it wasn't
No.
perfect, but it was a sign of hope for a lot of people that they weren't worrying about their sons being shot or murdered or going
It's
into
still a
town and
working
being blown up.
document. It's
It's
still a
still
working
a working
document today.
document, but we need to work on it, and not just work on it because the protocol is doing something. We need
Yeah.
to work on it with the civic forum. We need to work on it for the the Bill of Rights. We need to work on it for everything that's in that document.
Yeah.
We need and we deserve. We're better than what we're getting at the minute.
Yeah.
And
And
at
we
the
need-
minute we're not getting nothing, and we're better than that.
And we need more investment in women for women to
Absolutely.
participate.
Absolutely.
So I think about 6-7 years ago, we had 2 residentials that we were to do separately, ourselves and Shankill, and myself and Aileen came together and says, Aileen suggested epilogues. We had never heard of epilogues, and so I said, okay, we'll take a risk. You do one weekend, we'll do the next weekend, and we ran away to epilogues. We actually took 22 women. So we oversubscribed in our women that year because it was heavy duty with 22 women. But the epilogues itself is a powerful programme. So it was the women who had worked through the cross-community programme already, the good relations, getting to know each other. They were the women we took away. There are 5 pillars to epilogues. It's truth, justice, revenge, forgiveness and reparation. We mixed it up because we had staff, because for us it was a new initiative and we wanted to see what it was like for our staff, because our staff would then partake to pass it down to our users. It was heavy going, very heavy going programme, and so they can talk about the programme. What I can tell you of the epilogues today, from that programme we talked to Gaslight who own it, and we submitted an application to the Tudor Trust in England. And they came over and they met 3 women's centres who wanted this partnership and wanted to roll this programme out as far as we could with other women. And they funded us for 3 years. And the biggest thing that really got the funding was the fact that women's centres were involved in it, and women at grassroots level would be the ones that get involved in the programme. But you can talk about what you thought of the programme at the time.
I actually would prefer that some of the participants would talk about it, because, you know, I've been doing it for 15 years, as you know, Susie, and I think it's one of the best good relations programmes that I've came across, and I'm doing this good relations peace building in community for 26 years. And when I done it as a student, doing it for the first time, I done it on a cross-community, cross-border initiative, and we had police in the room, we had army in the room, we had the paramilitary people who were involved in the conflict in the room on both sides, and we had people from north and south. So my experience of that epilogue was so different because of all those people in the room. But I came away from it saying, right, that's the programme I'm going to introduce, you know, in the centre. So for 15 years I have been doing it and scraping, trying to get funding for it all over the place. And now, because of Gaslight, because of Stephen and Jim, we were able to recruit women from urban and rural, you know, all now right as far as Strabane, Portadown, Craigavon, Derry, you know, all up and round the north coast. Women are now all part of that 3-year funding to be run out throughout across the whole province.
It is an individual journey.
Oh, it is absolutely an individual journey, and nobody can tell you. Anya, you know, you done that one, the first one that Susie and I came together on. What was your experience of it?
Well, I was kind of brought into it because I'm the Young Women's Project Coordinator with the Falls Women's Centre. And so Susie was saying, look, Anya, this programme's coming up. It's something that it's hard hitting. She kept saying it's hard hitting, and I was going,
Because I kept telling her it was hard hitting.
thinking it wasn't going to be,
Yeah.
it'll not be that difficult. But I went on the first weekend, and me and Aileen were out having a smoke at one point over the weekend, and I thought my brain was melting out my ear. I was like, it was just hard hitting, which I didn't believe it was going to be. It was it was watching the videos, listening to people's stories on all sides, which for me was difficult because I come from a nationalist Republican background. So I had to listen, but not that I had to listen, I was listening to all of these stories. And at times I found some of it easy to swallow, some of it very difficult to swallow. And I think at that point, that's where Eileen found me out having a smoke, reevaluating my life.
And I kept you could see your wee head was.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
And I kept saying, Eileen, I don't know what I think right now. And Eileen just was like, trust the process, come back for the second weekend. And I did. And I walked away from it thinking, you know what, regardless, and we were talking about this earlier, regardless of your background or where you come from, to hear the stories of people from backgrounds that are different to yours and actually understand where they're coming from and why they react the way they do and why they feel the way they feel is powerful. The only word I could describe was powerful. I walked away from it thinking differently, feeling differently, maybe still having the same kind of opinions and that, but just a different slant on them. And it was...
I don't know if it was you or not. I think it was you, but I don't want to say that it was in case it wasn't. But I'll say it was. And I can remember going to you after the second residential to see how you were then. So I don't know. And it was, I went into this process like this.
I did.
Was it you?
It was me.
And I'm going home with this process like this.
Yeah.
And I just went, well, my work's done.
Yeah.
And that's what it was about. It's about opening people's eyes to other people.
Yeah.
Who have.
And the thing for me was too, like, this was a room full of women, who all came from different backgrounds, and even like telling your own story.
And we had protesters there from both sides.
Yes.
In the one room.
I might have been one of them in the beginning. But it was listening to each other and telling your own story. Telling your own story was very difficult to do. And I think that's where my protest was at the start. I don't want to tell anybody who I am or where I'm from or what I do. But in the end, like, wow, like just even that sharing and like even the bonding of that for women. Like, there were women who, when they, from the unionist perspective, who hear the term Brits out, and they always believed that when they heard that term that it was derogatory to them coming from a unionist background and from a British perspective. And what they learned was that when that is being said, that it's not the people, it's the uniform, and it's the government that they're talking about. And they didn't understand. And that was something that I thought, you know what, like, there was learning on all sides.
Yeah.
I learned a lot as well about there is a human behind the uniform.
Yeah. And I think some of the women, because there was a group there who protested the camp, the Twaddale camp at Ardown.
Yeah,
and there was women who protest at Ardown side, facing each other, each other at that protest, and they were in the same workshop in Apalogs, and the banter between them was unbelievable. Not the first residential, because I think the first residential everybody's sussing each other out and everything else, but the second round the banter was great. I mean, one of them was shouting over to the other one. You travelled the whole way from West Belfast to stand in the rain to protest. Fair play to you, love, and that's the way the banter. But that's what women can do. Women can talk about those difficult conversations, but talk about it in a fun and light way. And there's there's not one woman that has went through that doesn't want to do it again.
But it's the ripple effect too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the women on that first programme, I know 3 of them set up their own women's group.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know, so it's not that, you know, you do the resident. The biggest thing for us is you just don't do a programme and it ends there and you're sent home and you ask yourself, what was that all about? Because it just stopped dead. And that's the biggest problem we have, that we need to keep continuing
The
to
journey.
build and build and build. And so from that first programme, like, we can identify women who have set up their own women's group, still keep in contact on Facebook. We've had women who've moved on to different civil rights groups and got involved in other community organisations and took a different turn. You know, I know one woman who joined PPI, which is, you know, a human rights group. And before that she was very straight-laced, single-minded. So it's the individual change it makes in someone's life. Sometimes we can't capture all that, but anything we do, we know we've made a change on an individual basis.
One thing that I came away from it with was we do good relations work with young people. And one thing that I wanted to do was there is like one for young people
Yes, there
that
is,
we
yeah.
haven't ran yet, but I was thinking, and I know it would be different because obviously the women that were in the room have been through the conflict when we did the epilogues, and obviously it'll be different because when you're working with young people, they haven't been through
But
all of that.
it doesn't take in the troubles.
Yeah, well, that's
It's
what I was
more
thinking.
about it's more about
our
the racism
mindsets
and it's about the graffiti
Yeah.
and it's about all the language that's used
Yeah.
with youth, and it's actually local youth.
Yeah.
So there's youth on it from the Falls, and there's youth on it from Meshankin, there's youth on it from Eastbill,
Yeah.
there's youth from all over the country
Yeah.
who actually take part in this. So you're hearing from real, it's not actors, you're hearing
Yeah.
the way
Real
you
people.
heard, it's real people,
Yeah.
and you're hearing what they have
And there
to
is
say.
a big
yeah.
piece of work to be done. I know we say the conflict's over. There's one side of the conflict over. The conflict's still going on because our politics isn't working. It's just going on now in a different way.
Yeah.
And we aren't looking to see how that addresses or affects our young people in their future. You know, because we are still growing up with us and them, even through the media. We are growing up with us and them. So you're sucking all that in from your media. Oh, there's them on that side and us and they're looking that. So there has to be something that needs to be even furthered, that disappears. And it's heightened even with Brexit. Like, we talked about how before Brexit and the peace process, a lot of our young people felt European. You felt you had that whole freedom of movement
They
going
weren't British or
within
Irish,
Europe.
they were European.
You could go anywhere, and now Brexit has shut that door on us. And, you know, are you going back into your own wee silo of us and them, and we're English, you're Irish, we're British. So there has to be something that needs to change for the young people, just to let the young people get that sense of freedom again, and that sense of, I don't care what side you're from.
I think that's what's good about the youth work that we do, because you're not just, you know, good relations programs aren't all about the orange and green. Like, there are the health programs, the you know, drama, like any, like sexual health even, you know, you're bringing groups together that are doing programs on issues that are affecting them, like, yes, like violence
Gender,
against women
yeah.
and girls. You know, there's loads of programs there that we're running. You're running health programs at the minute, aren't you?
Yeah, we have like a lot of physical activity sort of things. We have people from both communities come together and take part in like chair aerobics and boot camps and things like that, because the physical activity and the social aspect of it is still like really, really important. We also do like mindfulness as well. And how to deal with stress and things like that, and it just sort of brings everybody together, which I think is really good.
Yeah. And it is that common ground, you know. If you do something physical with young people, you bring them all together and you have them running about or even sitting around a campfire. You know, it's that's the bonding, that's what's going to bring young people together.
And I think Carrie is actually an example of what our young programs do.
Oh yes.
Because she's very shy on it. She's a
Yeah.
newbie, you know, and she's a newbie because where did you come from?
So I started off as a participant in Shankill Women's Centre on the Young Women's Project. I sort of came in and I didn't really know anything or know what I was doing or wasn't really having a great time. And when I came into the centre, like nobody cared where I came from or what had, you know, sort of went on. I was just like accepted and brought in, and a lot of the work that I done has really, really built my confidence. I've made loads of friends from like all over the place, like not just my community, but other people's, you know, communities, and we're just sort of like one. We just become like one community. There's no divide, there's no anything, and with all the help that I sort of had, obviously, as Eileen was saying, like it's really, really brought me up, and I've now got a job, and it just feels really good to be able to give to other people what I've received, and I know it works, and I know that, like, I know how important it is, and it's just brilliant.
Yeah. I think that's what one thing for me about the women's sector is, because I've been working with the Falls Women's Centre for 6 years now, and for me, it felt like I was coming home. Just walking in the doors felt like coming home, you know.
Because she's got a good boss.
Is that because
It
she's
is,
on the
but
phone?
it is also, you know, you're working with good people. You know, you're working with people who are like-minded, and when you're coming in through the doors, you're a woman coming in through the doors. Initially, like not just a staff member, you're a woman first, and so the work starts as soon as you come in the door. You're being worked on, you know.
And, yeah.
Your confidence, you know. I mean, we're offered alternative therapies. We're offered counselling if we need. You know, it's all on site. The programs that are run, any education programs. If you want to get involved, come on. I was encouraged to go back to university. I'd lost confidence completely, and was encouraged to go back to university and got a first in my degree last year. You know, so like that's how powerful like the women's sector is, and like working well, not just working within a women's centre, but also participating.
Just on something that Carrie said there, and I think us oldies don't really recognise it the same, that we're all one, you know, with the younger women coming in. But that was my experience as well, going into the women's centre. It's not about religion, it's not about where you live, it's not about your background, it's about you're a woman and you're in here for a reason, and whatever that reason is, let's hope we can help you in that reason. So there's no divide, it's all one, and recently, and more so often now over the last say 10-15 years, where women from other countries, young women from other countries are coming in and joining in. We are young women, and religion's not even mentioned. Only we have to do it on a funding application or fill in an evaluation. We would know the religion of these women coming in. You know, I don't know what your religion is, Karen, or do I care? It's not an issue for me at all. But that's not the focus. Yeah. The focus is improving women's lives. And you are an example of coming through one of the young people's programs, seeing an opportunity of a job, luckily enough, in the Women's Centre, and a number of you actually applied for it. And they knew only one of them was going to get the job, but it was the interview experience that they applied for, you know. So there's real life experiences there within. And Carrie was lucky enough to come off with the job, and she's just...
Some of our words, and we had this conversation actually last night, some of the words that are given to us from our government and from funding actually creates a conflict and a divide. Good relations, cross-community. Why do we have to have that sort of language, that sort of speak, to actually explain what we're doing? And we were saying this last night, how can we find a way to make new words to that are more positive and don't lose the ethos of what we are. Yes, we are doing good relations, we are doing cross-community. Peace building I'm fine with, because peace building is always moving to a future. Mm-hmm. So that is a future, but cross-community and good relations is a past.
Yeah.
And we need to learn a new way to speak that eliminates them negative words.
Well, when I speak about the work that I do, Susie, I change the words, because I work with women from across the communities. And because I am working with women from across the communities, because I don't want nobody left behind. I don't want women who are from an Indian community background or a Chinese community background, and North Belfast a Jewish community background. I want nobody to be left out. But if I say cross community, that's only orange and green, and I'm leaving an awful lot of the population of where I work out. And I want everybody
But
to be
our
included.
government is feeding us that down. Do you know, that's in our applications. That's in our monitoring forms and our monitoring returns cross community. So we do have to find a new way of moving out into a more positive speak that actually separates,
cross-community,
that,
'cause there's no
that
government.
actually even stops identifying one woman from another woman. Because once we say cross community, you're looking and going, well, someone's Catholic and someone's Protestant, or you're a CRM or a PUL. And they're words that are fed to us from government. So our government needs to look at a way of creating a peace building process that looks forward and not backwards.
Like as I was saying earlier, you know, working in the women's sector, and if I'm feeling like coming home, I think for me, working with Susie was, but it was, you know, it was that welcome, and that even in the interview, it was that welcome, like you just that knowing, like that this is a safe space, and it's a safe space for women, it's a safe space for me, and you were the one that encouraged me and pushed me to go back to university, and you pushed me to do what I needed to do.
Thank you.
And look where I am now, you know.
That's great.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
you know, and you don't give yourself enough credit as well. You don't, you know, you are one of, like, the names when you're talking about the women's sector.
What about me? On you, come on.
And, of course, Aileen.
Keep going, and you don't
But, you know,
remember.
well,
Yes.
I wouldn't have met you only 4 coming through
Absolutely,
here as well.
absolutely,
And, like,
yeah.
sure, when you come in, it's like, all right, and you're right, Aileen, you know, and, like, we've done epilogues.
Oh, we did.
Like, we'll have that.
Yes.
Sisters,
Sure, and-
sisters
yeah, that's
together.
what it
We've
is.
done
It
epilogue.
really is, like,
Yeah.
because you really did encourage me during that. Like, do come back and you trust the process. Trust
Yeah.
the process and you'll see. And I did, and
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it was amazing.
opened your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
you
for that,
still,
too.
I don't know, but it wasn't about us, and I did say to you, it's not about changing your opinion here on you.
Yeah,
And I
it's
did
just
say
the
that, I
process,
just the
Yeah.
process.
And you're beginning a new journey. You're
Yeah,
our
you're
future.
new, babe.
You're
You're
our
new, babe.
future women.
Yeah. You're going to end up like us. God help you.
We
That would
that
be
is
Leave
we
now.
do hope that women come behind us to keep ours have been a journey. It's been sometimes ups and downs, but I have to say it, for a job, it's been a dream job.
Yeah.
I've never worked anywhere else, so it's been a dream job. And I do hope, our hope is, because I know talking to Betty and Shankill Women's Centre, our hope is that young women come behind us and continue to carry the mantle that we've been carrying and keep driving it forward.
But they need to invest in that.
Yeah,
We
you need
need
investment.
that investment for our young women. You know, there's a lot of funding out there for a lot of young men, which they need it as well. But I think there has to be that more of a bigger push for our young women, because our young women, you know, you are the leaders. You are the next leaders.
It's not over yet.
You know, it's not. And again, you know, we're in the job that we're doing because we love the job, you know, and we love the people that we meet. Some give us a hard time. Some, you know, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of risk taking and good relations work and peace building work, and we do it because we want to see a better future for our young people, you know, and it's about making a difference. I joined the trade union to make a difference, and I came into the community to try and make a difference too. I would like to be part of the future because I have been part of the past. I have been part of the history, and I want to see the future that my history told me I would get. My dreams for the future is probably, I'll not go back to when I was 14 or them 14 years, but I want to see equality. I want to see people being treated exactly the same, no matter about their gender or where they're coming from. I want decent jobs. I want proper childcare for mothers to allow women to get out into the workplace, because we have a problem with childcare at the minute, and decent wages at the minute. We're in a recession, so there's a whole lot else going on. But here in Northern Ireland, I want to see a civic forum, and I want to see a Bill of Rights, and I want to see people who have suffered in the past, as we all have at certain degrees, and we need to look at that victims and survivors role and what they're trying to do here. And yeah, we're using the Good Friday Agreement for the protocol's breaking the Good Friday Agreement. So when the protocol issue is sorted, I want to get back to the Good Friday Agreement and implement everything that was in the Good Friday Agreement that was promised to us, that I voted for. I didn't vote for St Andrews. I didn't vote for New Decade, New Approach. I voted for the Good Friday Agreement, and that's the thing that I hold close, because it will give me more, and it will give communities, and it will give grassroots a bigger say.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said there. For me, the future is about removing stereotypes and stigmas on young people, on women, on gay people, lesbian, like all of those tags that people are given should be removed. Change the language used when you speak about women. The big thing at the minute is all around the violence against women and girls, but it's also about the language that is used, how the media portray women, how the media and the government, it comes from the top down, and it needs to change from the top down.
You can see what's happening on social media with the statements that's been made when a woman's hair's not tidy.
Yeah.
Or the colour of her dress doesn't suit her complexion.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It needs to change, and it needs to change from the top down,
Yeah.
and that's what I would like to see from the future.
Well, my future's here and now, and I'd like to see a working government. And I would like to see the First Minister that was elected in her seat.
I agree with Ollie, actually. I don't really know if I have anything else to add to that.
No, covered it all.
I would like to see the future be better. I don't want to see anything repeating. I don't want the hatred. I don't want the division. I just want everybody to be safe and happy and things to be good.
Yep.